Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Easy Conversations podcast, a podcast about having easy conversations, where we talk about mental health, adversity, spirituality, and societal issues. I'm your host, Furkan Dandia, and this week my guest is Sean Parker. And in this episode, we delved into pressing societal issues such as the dark side of false allegations, which have recently captivated public discourse and garnered significant attention. Our aim was to shed light on the potential harm inflicted on individuals and communities by addressing this complex issue's intricacies and consequences. In today's digital age, where information spreads like wildfire and the court of public opinion often presides before a proper investigation, false allegations have become contentious. Accusations of wrongdoing can have far-reaching implications affecting not only the lives of individuals falsely accused, but also the broader fabric of society. We must recognize the gravity of this phenomenon and its potential to tarnish reputations, undermine trust, and perpetuate injustice. We embarked on this journey with the aim to dissect the multifaceted nature of false allegations. Our exploration encompassed various dimensions, including the motivations behind making false claims, the ripple effects on the accused and their loved ones, and the overall societal ramifications. Before releasing this episode, I went back and forth and consulted a couple of my mentors. My internal struggle was with coming across as taking sides. However, I also realized that the reason why I do this podcast is to share the story of others, but also give a voice to the people who often don't have one, which is why I believe Sean Parker approached me. While I believe Me Too movement was needed because there were several men in positions of power who took advantage of their positions and abused women. Talking to Sean Parker made me realize that he's a genuine and authentic man who realizes and regrets the mistake he made. However, what I wanted the listeners to understand was, does the punishment fit the mistake? Sean Parker is an individual who is now fighting for false allegations and bringing this to light and attention to people who did not have that awareness. He's a British writer, artist, and academic in art, cultural theory, and justice reform. He lived in Istanbul for 10 years until 2014, where he lectured at Istanbul University and gave a TED Talk, Stammering and Creativity. He has published or contributed to several books, won 6 Koestler Arts Awards, and a Perry Lectures Essay Award in 2019. Parker is the editor of False Allegations Watch for the Empower the Innocent organization, which is based out of the University of Bristol. I really hope you get a lot out of this episode. And if at the end, if you could leave a review or comments in the comments section, I would truly appreciate it. Right, Sean, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today, and I'm grateful that you taking the time to join me. But before we get started, I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and let the listeners know a little bit about your story, and then we'll kind of get into our conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Furkan. Nice to be here. I'm a writer and artist, and a lecturer sometimes, and I'm here or talking to you about this because in 2016 I was running an arts centre and the music venue on the south coast of England, and the Christmas of that year. It's a long story, which of course we can go into.
Right.
I ended up being arrested at the high time of the Me Too movement, and 14 months later, going on trial and going to prison, and for reasons which I'm not guilty and continuing to appeal and to do all kinds of things to fight.
Right. Yeah, and how long were you in prison for?
For 4.5 years. 4.5 years.
And
It's
how
an
long
8.5
have you
year
been?
sentence.
Sorry, what's that?
It's It's an 8.5-year sentence, but in England, everybody gets released halfway through to then do the rest of their sentence, being checked in the community and that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
though they've changed that recently, but not before I was convicted.
Okay. Okay. And how long have you been out for? Obviously, you're still serving your sentence in checked in, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, correct. Been out since last May, 2022, so it's back months, is it? Something like all
Okay.
been
Well,
fine.
I mean, yeah. So, do you want to share what happened and help us understand why you believe that you're not guilty?
Sure thing. Um, that art center, well, we had lots of customers. Um, I was a bookings manager and also the managing director on paper, and I possibly took on more than I sort of should have.
Mhm.
Uh, there we are. That's history. But I was drinking my own bar, which is obviously, in retrospect, not a very good idea for anybody. But that's my own mitigation. um, we had the person that was the complainant was a friend of mine and was an upholsteress, a customer of the place, but we chatted every day, kind of thing. And in Christmas, a couple of days before Christmas, we spent sort of to 10 hours drinking together and then went to bed at the end of those 10 hours
Mhm.
in the morning. Um, there was no force, no violence, nothing like that. It was a very brief one night stand, which is um, either of us can barely remember. But
Right.
her boyfriend, who was applying to join the police at the time, reported me. It's a third party reporting the next day.
Right.
Um, to give this some context, if everyone goes, what, half years for that? What they did was added to sexual assault charge to this, which was from 6 months before. On camera, it was caught a different friend who wasn't close to me. We didn't know each other properly. Also drunk. Okay, acknowledged. We kissed each other, instigated by her. So that was caught on CCTV. But they put it together with this other thing, which is a plan that they were doing at the time to join the cases to give them some more weight. Basically,
Mhm.
Alison Saunders was doing this to many men, and then not soon after that, she got deposed, not because of this, but for disclosure issues. So put together a very serious allegation with a very non-serious one to
Right.
make the main allegation. Um, in a nutshell, not much of a
Yeah.
nutshell.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing all that. So you obviously think that, this was fabricated case where it was mutual, right? The encounter was mutual. You didn't force anything. Why is it important for you now to talk about this while you're obviously appealing your own case?
Um, because in the culture we can see right now, after Johnny Depp, after Eleanor Williams here, who was just put away for 8.5 years herself for 6 counts of perverting the course of justice for making false allegations. False allegations are all over the place, and this is not about blaming the victim, and it's not about believing the victim. It's about
Mhm.
the fact that the system is enabling anybody to make any complaint and to then upend people's lives. And it's happening to men all over the place. Say specifically men. I'm not particularly a sort of men's rights activist or anything as such. I don't identify with any such group, but it does seem to be happening to men as some sort of a plan to stop certain behaviours. The the things that happen to people like me are very, very common in 9% of these kind of things. So most of them don't go to court outside of people like Alison Saunders, which is why she
Mhm.
was got rid of. Um, but when it's a serious thing, Mr. Wayne Couzens here is in Britain is a massive case. He was a serving metropolitan police officer who
Mhm.
raped and murdered a young woman. It was huge news. It was a very distressing case, and he's a one-off. Everyone says it's not just a bad apple. Well, he was. He's a bad apple in the police force, and now he's gone to prison forever. And
Right.
but they're conflating all of these sexual assault things, which can be a touch on the bum up to something very, very serious, putting it all together in the media. And lots of media have had enough of this, which is interesting to see. First time I've seen that for a long time.
Right.
Um,
And how has it impacted you, right? Like, you're obviously still serving your time, but what does this look like for you now to be able to even work or just in general your whole life?
Um, it's had a difficult impact on work because I'm a writer and I'm an arts guy. People don't usually expect this from for arts guys, or people who are, not, how do you put that? I don't have comorbid that kind of behaviors in my past, and lots of people in my boat don't either. Um, the BBC got rid of all the radio plays that I used to have, got rid of it off their site without telling me. To TED, I had a TED talk up there. There is still a version out there, but they got rid of mine from their main site, which had 40,000 views on it.
Mm,
To Dammering and Creativity TED talk I gave. And lots of little organizations who were more indie also got rid of me, any reference to me, without checking how I was, sort of checking my case, nothing. They just binned. And that's why now it, I'm very, very passionate about cancel culture in academia and the arts. That's actually my main thing. Because it's so destructively done, just binning people with
right.
asking what happened.
Mhm. Yeah, so you've obviously been a victim of the cancel culture, and obviously it's gonna impact your life even from a financial perspective,
Mm.
and that's huge. And I guess going back to the whole aspect of being able to speak up now, why what are some of the things you're doing in terms of these false allegations? And obviously you've already been impacted. You can't change what's happened to you, but it sounds like it's important for you to make sure it doesn't happen to other people.
Yeah. People in my boat usually come out of prison, get and just go and get on with their lives and sort of scuttle away, totally understandably, because the weight of it is so heavy. What I'm doing is that I'm so cross with it, but not in a not in a victimizing way, just in a we need to talk about this, Kevin, kind of way, because it's just happening to many, many people. Nobody, everyone, it's very difficult to get on the media. Not that
Mhm.
I'm that's not an aim. This kind of conversation is good because we can expand and actually talk about it. But I know it will be packaged in a very different way on the mainstream media. And the fact is, there's something going on. And since 2010, since the Title IX thing was passed in America, we've imported all that stuff, the Me Too stuff, and it's just piling on and on and on. Britain apparently is actually kind of quite good in the fight back. Or quite sounds so conflicty. I'm not a conflicty kind of guy, but we just need to
Right.
express ourselves. And the freedom of speech is very, very important to artists and to anybody else. And when you've had a one night stand gone wrong, or just contested, or just perhaps you used to be too promiscuous or something like that, which has
Mhm.
happened on both sides of the sexual divide. But we're all being binned for it. Loads of people have had enough of it because it does
Right.
destroy lives, and it, you know, just in answer to your other question there about what else am I doing, I've become the editor of False Allegations Watch, which is an organisation as a part of the Empowering the Innocent org here in Britain, which
Right.
operates out of the University of Bristol. Dr. Michael Norton is the expert on this subject, and he's kind of taken me on as the editor of this thing. And we report on lots of cases from the States, lots of cases from over here. Anybody who claims to have been a victim of a miscarriage of justice.
Right. So I guess that's what my next question was. So you are working with someone in terms of doing this aspect of bringing false allegations to the public eye. Now, just to give the listeners an idea of how many cases are we talking about here? Like, how many cases have you seen roughly?
Um, the stuff that comes to false allegations watch is people that are kind of aggrieved and aggrieved to the point that they want to pursue and to publicize. So it's a very small amount of a much bigger number who don't do that
Hmm.
and want to protect their families and whatnot. Um,
Right.
kind of according to Safari, or the sexual assault falsely accused research uh, kind of initiative organization, very, very, very specific and
Hmm.
forensic. Um, a fifth of the people that come to them are kind of claiming innocence to some degree. So if that's 80,000 prisoners in Britain, that comes to 15,000 people. So any given time in the British prison system, it's about 15,000 who say something's gone wrong to the point of miscarriage of justice. Either
Right.
I didn't do it, or it wasn't how it's been portrayed. But you won't hear from the media because they just go on what the court says. But
Hmm.
courts just do what the police say, what the CPS says, and which comes from a central narrative, which for 10 years has been believe the victim.
Right.
You know, started by Keir Starmer and operated by other directors of public prosecutions. So I'm quite boned up on all of this kind of info just because of what
Right.
I've been. I'm an arts guy. I don't talk about this stuff beforehand.
Right.
I put my brain and the concentration of being in prison onto this subject.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, just looking back, because obviously, like, I just want to get your perspective on it. But like looking back, you obviously put yourself in a situation where this happened, and to your point, it's not fair, and it's been taken completely out of context. What could you have done differently? And like looking back, do you feel like maybe you could have handled those situations differently? And perhaps, is there a part of you that feels like maybe you shouldn't have put yourself in those situations? Like, is there any of that going on in your head?
Oh yeah, yeah, man. If you're inside, if you don't start to reflect on something, and you're missing a trick,
Right.
because I am innocent as charged. However, you kind of go, "Well, why am I here too?" And the fact is, I don't drink anymore,
Hmm.
but not in an evangelical way. Just the fact that it's very expensive, and it's as you get older, when you drink, the outcomes are not always positive. They get worse
Right.
and worse as you get older. You get more argumentative and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And this kind of misunderstanding can happen. And it's happened to lots of my customers at the venue. It's happened to many of my friends, and we just talk about it every day at work. So I don't drink anymore. I mean, but I'm not abstinent. If there's a glass of wine, I'll have it. I just don't have it as an aim in life, which has been
Mm.
been good. It's been a positive. And
Yeah.
I I I also think there's something about kind of intimacy issues, which I'm happy to acknowledge. If you have promiscuous sex to any degree of any gender, then there might be intimacy issues happening underneath that. And I did used to be promiscuous. I'm not anymore, but there was too much of that going on now and again. But that does not equate rape or sexual assault. So that's the problem here. Promiscuity is not that, but
Right.
the radical feminists are making it that, and that's the danger.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, and I appreciate that. And I guess, is there anything you want to alert men to when it comes to this stuff? Because obviously, when you and I talked offline, there's that fear, right, for men that, and I see it too, especially with the younger men. You kind of start thinking about, okay, what kind of situations do I not want to put myself into? And there are consequences for some of the choices. Now, obviously, socially, promiscuity wasn't really an issue in the past, but now there is that fear, right? And whether you look at it from a moral perspective, perhaps it's not the right way to approach relationships anyways. But do you feel like there's a fear for men now? And what would you like to share on that side of things?
Um, there is a fear out there, isn't there? And I don't want to add to that. But here we are, and it's. I don't think people should be living in a state of fear. It's the media responsible for that, and it's certain powers. If they want to decriminalize promiscuity or to criminalize alcohol, there are big scopes for doing both of those things. But those shouldn't be the cases, because promiscuity is a life choice that people go through, and they usually go
Right.
through, stay there forever. It's not a good look Hugh Hefner in your 70s or any other time necessarily. It's a journey. Um, and the problem is these activists don't acknowledge journey anymore. They just do
Mhm.
good or bad, right or wrong, from their own perspective, with thinking about the full kind of color of kind of human life. Not sure if I answered your question there. I tried to.
Yeah, no, I think it is, what you're saying is, it is a part of life, and we shouldn't live in fear because of the consequences that may be dictated by activists, right? you should be able to make choices in life based on what you think is right and wrong. And sometimes you just don't know any better. And, you at certain points in your life, you do go down the hedonistic path and obviously you grow out of it, but it shouldn't be because that you're worried that you may go to jail for making certain choices in life, right? Obviously, you have to have you need to have a moral compass and live your life according to that. And obviously, there's consequences for certain choices, but stuff like that, that's part of day to day life. There shouldn't be a fear of living it, right? So I can understand that. Now, going back to your case, you obviously said there was a huge involvement from the lady's boyfriend, right? The person, your friend, or whom you were friends with. What was the individual's perspective on it? Was that ever brought to the table, or this was mainly driven by her boyfriend?
Um, well, I suppose I can talk about it now. Mm, it was the boyfriend that did the reporting, which I only discovered sort of later on. Um,
Hmm.
there are some aspects of the process which I can't go into too much because it's kind of sort of uh, being dealt with
Right.
under appeal as well. Um, but third party reporting is a very tricky thing because it's the weaponization of gossip. It's not person. And then
Right.
if they go to a sexual assault referral center afterwards, called a SARC here, um, then it's been proven. Basically, the counsellors there will say, "Are you going to press charges?" As if they're a policeman, and the solicitors too, Uh, and the police people doing this as well, in like an effort to get up a sort of social narrative about this kind of thing. If you go to a SARC, then they want to have a reason to continue to exist. And the reason to
Right.
continue to exist is to have more cases. So the more
Mhm.
cases, go and report him, And as far as I'm aware, my complainant didn't want to report, and she sort of said in court she didn't want to, and the boyfriend said this as well. So it's the thing is there hasn't been any contact since then, and
Right.
so I don't have any more except for what people have talked about here and there. Um,
Of course.
so yeah, I'm not sure if I answered.
No, no, I think it makes sense, but I think the case was already made, and to your point, because this is a narrative that's being driven hard, they just ran with it, right?
Oh, yes, yes, exactly. And I gave them the low hanging fruit at the time. It was high sort of the Me Too movement. The Harvey Weinstein was being arrested as I was on trial that week. So the jury going home, it's a 9-woman, 3-man jury, going home those nights watching Harvey Weinstein being taken down, whilst they're going to go back in court to look at me. And I was advised on the third day to not speak because of my stammer. The barrister said he didn't say this, but I heard him say it, and that's the reason I didn't speak. It could be seen as a sign of guilt. So
Mm.
I didn't get to give this kind of presentation in court. Not that I've been able to, because the barristers twist your answers. Um, I stopped myself being represented properly on advice, which is utterly fatal. So if there's any advice for people watching, make sure you do speak in court if you ever find yourself there.
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing you've mentioned here. So you were told or advised not to speak to defend yourself in court.
Mm.
And what was going on through your head to be able to comply with that?
Uh, Incredible stress at that time. It's now sort of
Of course.
almost 6 years ago, to 5 or 6 years ago. Um, on the Sunday before I was due to go into court, I was in bed thinking, right, you're going to have to speak. You're going to have to speak. This is the time to speak. So that they know what's happened. And I was prepared for that, but also receptive to what the barrister says, because you feel that you're there unfairly anyway, and you feel that they know something that you don't. So you go along with what they say. And on the third day, the witness who was going to speak for me decided to not speak, and we had to pull him there. And then he decided to not speak. He went hostile. So that really deflated my barrister, and it
Mm.
deflated our camp. And he said, "Oh, perhaps best not to speak." And I went, "Right, I'm not speaking then." and almost with a sense of relief, but also thinking I was chickening out. So if that's a term in the States, I don't know, but I kind of went from,
Yep.
I feel obviously stupid about that now. I felt stupid in prison, but it's the choice I made then as a much heavier stammerer than I am now.
Yeah. Yeah.
That time was more stressful.
Right. Right. No, I mean, I appreciate that. And so how are you coping with all of this? Obviously, one of the things I focus on is mental health. How are you dealing with all of this? Obviously, the stress you alluded to, but what's the coping style right now?
Um, an acknowledgement that I put myself in positions. I put myself in that venue. I opened it. I got there. I drunk what I drunk. She drunk what she drunk, and I ended up where I ended up. So there is that, and you have to be a man. If to, we don't really say that anymore, do we? But you've got to be a man and front up to it, and that's what I did inside.
Mhm.
Um, if there's a benefit to prison, and it's not, there's no benefit, but there's a concentrated life, so at least you can kind of focus where you are.
Mhm.
When you're innocent, you kind of go back to your core and go, well, who am I and how do I feel? And you kind of tighten up in a hostile way, not in a bad way, just in a what do I want to do now kind of way. It's like coming
Right.
out of grief in a way, isn't it? So um, it kind of honed everything and started. Uh, I'm a writer anyway, and sort of inside, I got a couple of books written, and I just sort of published one about a month ago, which I'm now promoting. So I've got I've got a lot of work, and I did a lot of research into this area to
Mhm.
discover the Title IX things and all those imports we have. So while it's a negative, I discovered many, many good artistic things and political things, and now I'm boned up on the subject of false allegations and spurious convictions too, which are more and more thousands of them.
Right. Right. So you've obviously been able to reflect and be able to generate a lot of writing out of this, but how are you dealing with your stress levels on a day-to-day basis, right? Because this must be taking a toll on your health. Are you keeping tabs on that, and what are the things you're doing to ensure, your health, at least your mental health and your physical health are in check?
I'll tell you what, it's an interesting one which I haven't sort of been asked before. And about sort of 20 years ago, I had a spell, about 25 years ago, I had a spell of anxious depression after my dad died.
Mm,
So I had sort of panic attacks, which became daily and which became its own anxious depression of questioning your sanity. I think I went bonkers really. And so for 10 years, I was trying to get better from that, from an
yeah.
awful, awful state of not being happy in your own head. So, which I guess is mental illness, but I wasn't, you couldn't tell. And the ex that I had at the time, which I lost then because of basically being so screwed up, couldn't even express that to her. So in time, you start to understand what you have gone through then. What I'm trying to say is that what I went through in prison and the trial doesn't compare to that because
Right.
because there I was questioning myself, which is that kind of, I wouldn't want to ever say I was suicidal, but
Mhm.
even thinking about suicide would give you a panic attack, that sort of thing.
Right.
So you just become screwy. Um, but then with the prison thing, it's much more the state doing it to you. So it's not really internal. It went back
Right.
into it I can trust, which is myself, having got better from the anxious depression. So there's a comparison there over 20 years. And basically, that was much, much worse
Mhm.
than this thing, which is state imposed. And it's a thing you can do something with, which is what I'm doing now. You can actually work on it, study it, and go, hey, world, this is what's happening to some men. But with anxious depression, it's so internal, and we're always going to have
Yeah.
grief.
Yeah.
So, in comparison, it's not as bad in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. So what you're saying is, did you actually have the tools to be able to deal with it this time because of your experience 20 years ago? And have you been using those tools? I guess that's the question.
I think probably so. I can remember 20 years ago saying to myself, things will never be worse than this. So, you know, kind of hold on to this because it will never be this bad. And that's true. 1999, something like that. So once prison happened, and you're thinking, well, this is the worst possible thing anyone can imagine. And it sure is. It's
Hmm.
the worst thing they can imagine doing to you, as
Right.
opposed to the worst thing that you've done to yourself, which
Hmm.
is the process of anxious depression and all those things, which I'm so happy I've left behind. I mean, you don't get better, you sit with it, but at least you know, you just come back to yourself, don't you? I come back to
Right.
myself, and I come back to myself after prison as well.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So what do the next steps look like for you? Like, what does the future look like, and where do you feel like you're headed with all of this?
Um, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that one. It's very cool to be able to speak to people like you and to your audience, just in order to help. As you can tell, I've no hate in me, I've no malice,
Hmm.
I've nothing like that. I've just got quite a lot of information and knowledge, and hopefully a message that you can get through this um, as well if people find themselves in that boat.
Yeah.
The work I'm doing with Dr. Norton at University of Bristol there is very valuable. It's pretty unpopular in the criminology world because false allegations are very much against a certain narrative. It's against the whole fucking narrative, isn't it, really, of the mainstream media?
Yeah.
We constantly have a fight, but I'm used to a fight because of the stammer, because of I've always been, and have an independent mind. So I have my own sort of kind of opinions on things. So this is just another extension of that. It's about fairness. To believe the victims thing, if it was once fair or doing to address the balance, isn't anymore. It just absolutely isn't. And you, of course, online, there's all these arguments between the rad fems and the trans lobby and the men's rights and all that stuff. And I'm
Mhm.
always trying to be the neutral water between those to try and get something better than what we've got at the moment. You know, so
Yeah.
would never use the word activist because I'm a writer. I know what I am. I'm a writer and an artist, and I'm very happy with that role. And I want to keep doing better writing. And just in the next couple of weeks, I think I've got an article in the National Review coming out, or an interview or something. So which is the biggest sort of thing in America there apparently. So that sort of thing's very exciting to get the
Yeah.
word out a little bit more in the most gentlemanly way possible.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I guess as far as like being able to do art or put yourself out there again, what does that look like in the future? Like, do you feel like this fight is something you're going to be doing for the rest of your life, or at some point you hope to go back to some of the other things that you're more passionate about? Or maybe this is your passion now. I don't know.
uh, it's just an aspect of what I do now
Yeah.
because I write on sort of this book here is about the stammering, and I published a book just last year which I also wrote at Dartmoor Prison about art because I'm a writer about art. So I still do all these things. I'm happy having those compartmentalizing. I
Hmm.
think it's quite a positive thing, And but I'm also kind of very happy to continue to talk about this kind of thing as much as people need it. I don't think it'll be the rest of your life sort of thing because at the moment the conversation is coming to a place of what are we going to do about
Hmm.
how the media and society treat historically very serious sort of thing of sexual assault. Well, it's been democratized now. They say over here kind of criminalized, decriminalized, but it hasn't been decriminalized at all. It's just been democratized. If you go into any pub in England, ask them openly who here has been sort of falsely accused of some domestic violence or sexual assault or something like coercive control. Every other
Hmm.
guy's put his hand up because that is the state that we're in. And you just have to have a conversation on the street to have that, of people being a bit more open about it. Um,
Right.
and of course, that openness is a risk to any uh,
Mhm.
controlled narrative.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And yeah, I guess there's that whole risk. So how do you get past that, right? Because we talked about being canceled in your case. How do you support men who are also being victimized in the same way to be able to speak up? And I guess that's part of the work you're doing, right? By being the model yourself.
Yeah, I hope so. These people are unfairly quietened. Exactly. They get a say in sort of thing is kind of overturned or quashed. to say there in a paper saying, isn't this an outrage, is
Mhm.
so much bigger than that. And with the False Allegations Watch, which is, if your viewers just go on to Google False Allegations Watch, they can see the sites in black and white. And I'm the editor of that. And we have lots of stories from Craig's sort of Saunders, Craig Saunders in the United States,
Mhm.
to people over here, people who got in contact with us, and we explore their story, explore their case. And as long as they're not blatantly lying, which really hasn't happened, we put the case forward and say, and the more we have of these, the more it's clear there's a certain pattern of bundling things together, ignoring evidence, police working in cahoots with the courts in both countries. And the longer that goes on and the bigger it becomes, it's now being talked about in the Telegraph over here, a huge paper, and the
Yep.
Mail, on the GB News, Talk TV. These sort of channels aren't heavily right wing. They're just free speech channels who have had enough of things like the
Mhm.
BBC and CNN. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's explicitly over there, but they've had enough of that kind of thing and going for an independent voice. And it's becoming very powerful.
Yeah. And there's another thing you touched on, because there is, anytime, as you can appreciate, you've got the polarizing approach, right? With Me Too as well. But even in the work you're doing, how do you know, and what are the things you're doing to make sure that people aren't coming in playing the victim and taking advantage of the work you're doing?
Mm. If that happened, I would have a good conversation with Dr. Norton, who's, I'm in touch with him every day. He's
Yeah.
been doing this for 20 years. So he's very, very in depth and he's got a forensic mind. So he's an academic. So he goes into things that I wouldn't necessarily spot. I give things the glitz and the glamour and the grammar, but he would do so. In terms of a professional partnership, he will be all over that kind of thing. And he has sort of said, "Oh, are we sure?" But the thing is, with False Allegations Watch, it's not about saying, "Are you sure they're innocent and guilty?" Because that's a job for the courts, who do so brilliantly at it. What we do is we put the voice of people who are not heard elsewhere. That's the freedom of speech thing, which is so
Right.
impassions me, even if there's a chance that they did do it. Just to give you a quick example, Mr. Clive Queeman is Britain's oldest prisoner maintaining innocence. He's been in since like 1988 and
Mhm.
was convicted of killing. He's a South African from Zimbabwe, and he was convicted of killing someone then 35 years ago, always maintained his innocence. And the amount of non-disclosure that's gone on is insane. And you just have to look at his thing. But the CCRC, the Criminal Cases Review Commission, refused to open his case again to say this guy is clearly shouldn't be inside. And he's been in the
Right.
longest. So there's that kind of thing that we look at too. It's all sets cases. It's also that area of the things as well, just where things have gone wrong, which he used to be a neighbor of mine.
Mm.
So there's all kinds of things where things have gone wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Sean, I mean, thank you for coming on here and sharing all of this. I really appreciate it. And how can listeners learn more about the work you're doing? I know you talked about the false allegations piece that they can find online, but what are some other ways they can find some of the work you're doing and look into it a little bit more?
Yes, thank you. I've got a site on Amazon there, but that's about my old work more than it's about art and music and a little bit of justice reform on my Amazon thing. Sean B.W. Parker. The False Allegations Watch is a good sort of library of all the things we're talking about today, so they can go through all of that. But I'm also a contributor to the New Thinking magazine, which is a very cool US site, which is quite hot now. The New Thinking, it's an orange site there. And basically, I'm very, very busy with all kinds of commissions and things. And this aspect here, though, the focus of it will be on the False Allegations Watch, but on YouTube as well, on Sean B.W. Parker YouTube. I've got a bunch of the videos as well, a couple of chats I've done like this, where I talk to a voice for men. I was talking to the Justice for Men and Boys here, which was given to a voice for men in the US. So
Mhm.
it just went huge. So not dissimilar conversation about that is on there too. But the best place if you want to read about it and all the different cases we cover is False Allegations Watch.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Sean. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, and good luck to the work you're doing. And, I hope you are able to find a path here. And it seems like you've been able to keep a level, steady head. So that's always good to see. So thank you for sharing all of that.
Thank you for your excellent questions. Very, very, very calm and well done. It's a nice way to do media for sure,
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for checking out this episode with Sean. Please leave a review or comments in the comment section. I love hearing from you. Or please subscribe to the podcast, which is the best way to support this podcast. And until next week.